And here's a nose, and here's a mouth, right? And he's kind of like, ah! Right? Like he's got a surprised look on his face. But if you live in China, you do not see a man in the moon. You see a rabbit in the moon, right? Here's the body, and there's the ears, and there's the head. And right, somebody's mind exploded just now. Somebody was like, rabbit! Oh my God! And this is the Jade Rabbit in the moon. This is obviously because he's playing a head kickball, which is a real game.
I don't really know what the extra circle there is for, but that's okay.
I don't know. But here's the Jade Rabbit, and the story is that the ruler of heaven, the Jade Emperor, came down to the earth to ask various creatures to give him food. He disguised himself as a baker, and he went to, what's the first one?
The monkey.
Monkey. He went to Monkey, and he said, "Monkey, bring me some food." And so the monkey climbed into a tree and got some fruit and brought it down and brought the old baker some food. And then he went to an otter and said, "Otter, bring me some food." And so the otter went into the river and caught a fish and came back and laid it at the Jade Emperor's feet, and he had some food. What was the next one?
It's a jackal.
Jackal, yes. So he went to the jackal and was like, "Jackal, bring me some food." And the jackal went out and caught a lizard and then stole a bowl of porridge.
Well, he stole a lizard too.
Yes, he stole a lizard and a bowl of porridge because he's a crafty jackal. He brought it back and laid it down at the Jade Emperor's feet. And then he went to the rabbit and said, "Bring me some food." And the rabbit knew that all he could gather was grass and that human beings can't eat grass. So he couldn't bring any food, so he decided to offer himself his food. And the rabbit shook his body, knocking off all of his fleas, because that's just how nice rabbits are. And then the rabbit stepped into the fire to sacrifice himself to be food for the old beggar man. Well, the old beggar man revealed himself to be the Jade Emperor, and he scooped the rabbit out of the fire. And because the rabbit was willing to sacrifice himself, he put the rabbit into the moon.
And just to be clear, the rabbit didn't get burned. It's fine. It was a cold fire, magically.
Just picturing the rabbit being like, "Ah! Ah!" And he's like, "Oh, congratulations, you won." I don't know, it's where my brain goes sometimes.
I don't know. I pulled this off of a kid's site, too, so, you might be.
Right. All right, so that is the story of the Jade Rabbit there in the moon as we approach a full moon. Aren't these stories wonderful? So stimulating. Really make you think. We're also going to talk a little bit about the planet Venus, so we're going to rotate around again. Did anybody, when they were coming in and seeing the sun go down, other way?
Well, it's 180 degrees away from the moon, so we can go either direction.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're getting there.
Apologize.
I was just going to keep consistent with my directions
That's
to not
right.
try and confuse people.
That's all right. So, did anybody notice a really bright star this evening, right around sundown? A couple of you said no. Saw a planet, right? And you know it's a planet because it doesn't twinkle. Ha ha. Some people are like, "Oh, really?" That's true. Planets don't twinkle. If you see a bright object by the sun, it's going to be hard for us to show it to you. By the way, I don't know what's going on with the projectors back here, but we suddenly have two moons going on right there. I don't know if anybody caught that back there.
All right, well, we'll get our tech on that.
But we'll deal with it. We'll be fine.
Balls.
So, and if you look over here, you can barely see a little V. Because the way our dome works, it's hard for us to land on the ground. You might see some white stuff down here. These are the lights of the city of Denver as they're depicted in our program. But as the sun went down, you could see Venus and Mercury right over here in the night sky. You'll be able to see Venus for a while. A lot of times people will call it the evening star. Venus is often called the evening star or the morning star, which makes the Roman name for Venus Lucifer. Isn't that fun when it's the morning star? And it's not just the Romans who thought that the morning star was evil. The Venus has also been associated with bad luck, but not by the Romans, and not necessarily in the morning, but in the evening. And that was with the Mayan people. The Mayan people. Venus was thought to represent one of their supreme gods, the feathered serpent god right here. And before the feathered serpent god became a god, the feathered serpent god died, and this happened when Venus appeared as an evening star. if we look at some of the Mayan ruins, they are specifically constructed at certain times of the year. Woo!
Sorry, that's.
So here on the pyramid here, the sun will shine through the gaps on the pyramid and will make a little snake-like shadow down this pyramid. And you can see the snake heads down here, right? The idea is that the feathered serpent god would come down the steps, here's the feathered serpent god right here, and go into a well and be dead for 4 days before ascending into heaven and becoming a god. And that meant to the Mayans, the evening star, Venus, in the evening was bad luck. There's some evidence in the codices that they would time attacks or wars around that time. And there is also descriptions of people climbing up to the top of their house and covering up their chimneys and closing up their windows so that no rays from the evening star, from Venus in the evening, could come in and give them bad luck. It was particularly bad luck for older men and older women and also children.
Well, it depended on when it would rise and according to the date. So the dates were listed in this poem that was from post-classical period Mayans. It was like one alligator and one jaguar. If the helical rising happened, then old men and old women would get harmed. But if it rose near one stag and one flower, children would be harmed. And it went on. It was really morbid, and I stopped writing things down after that. Sorry, Jose.
That's okay. It's just generally not a good time. Right? Now, the Mayans had really, really accurate observations of the heavens. We can show you one of their observatories here in a second. I'll show you an observatory right there. And so they would look out these windows here and they would observe objects in the heavens, and they were able to calculate out the cycle of Venus as viewed from the Earth to 8 years. They were really, really accurate with their measurements. They were able to get some really, really insanely accurate measurements.
They were off only by 0.08 days. So they knew the period of Venus from helical rising to next, so when it became a morning star, to the next was 584 days. But our modern measurement's 583.92. So this is crazy accurate.
And another reason that this is amazing is because they didn't have telescopes, right? A lot of the things that we do with our observations about calculating like the movements of planets and things, without telescopes, we, and I use the colloquial we, people in Eurasia believed that the Earth was the center of the universe because you don't have any visual reference to disprove that, right, without a telescope. And without a telescope, not only were the Mayans be able to like specifically calculate out the movements of Venus, but they were also able to discover something that we call precession. The world is turning like a top, it sort of wobbles, it's moving backwards through the houses of the zodiac. It is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That's a real thing. We're moving into Aquarius. And the Mayans figured that out. That's why they created that calendar that ended in 2012 when we all died.
Which didn't end. It just restarted. It's fine.
No, we all died. We just haven't realized it yet.
Oh, I got really excited when I got to mark all of those books on December that were about the end of the world.
Yeah.
To put them on clearance on December 22nd, 2012. It was like the most satisfying feeling I've ever had.
That's a great Barnes & Noble sale, I feel like, right there.
Exactly. Well, 3-year employee.
Well, that brings us to the end of sort of visible objects we see in the night sky, that particular section of Space Tours Live. So now comes the
Great
time.
Space Escape. I love how you're mixing your shows now.
I've been at work since 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm
got
so
this.
sorry. Where's my beer? Yes, that brings us to the end of that section of Great Space Escape. Now comes the time when we want to know what you guys want to learn about in the universe. To get us started, we're going to fly off to Venus. And that will be our first destination. And while we're there, if you ever have questions,
Comments,
or just general perceptions about the universe, feel free to shout them out. I can't really see your hands. I feel like I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot when I say that, but that's okay.
and we got some fun stuff happening in our dome. Sorry, guys. It'll be fine. Just don't look in the back right corner of the dome, and it'll be fine.
We won't put anything back there. It'll be fine. Yeah, that's like this weird line. This is Venus, everybody. Isn't she lovely? Actually, Venus I like to call Earth's evil twin. Because Venus is just slightly smaller than the Earth, but not really a fun place ever at all, ever. The atmosphere on Venus is about 92 times thicker than the Earth's atmosphere. That means if you stood on the surface of Venus, it'd be like standing at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. You would literally be crushed. But there wouldn't be water above you, it would just be air. Nothing but air above you. Now, Venus has lots of clouds made of sulfur dioxide and lots of other nasty things in it, and oxide. Most of the atmosphere is made of carbon dioxide. And that traps heat near the surface of Venus. This makes Venus the hottest planet in the solar system. Average surface temperature hovers around 900 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to melt lead. Can we show Venus without the clouds?
We can.
I know, right? This is a radar image.
Let's just get a little closer while we're at it.
Yeah, where you see like sort of these lighter spaces is where it's like rough, like mountainous and valley terrain. And where you see the darker areas are relatively smooth plains. And then you see all these spots right here, and we're pretty sure that these spots are volcanoes. And we think that the volcanoes on Venus are erupting almost all the time, which is why it has such a thick atmosphere and why it's so hot. So hot. Venus. So steamy. It's like a great vacay spot. If you want to work on your... Well, no, you wouldn't get a tan because the clouds are so thick. You just burst into flames. You just spontaneously burst into flames.
You know, if that's your thing, that's okay. You can do that.
No, my sunglasses! That's what I would think. We, and anytime I say we, I mean the sort of Jungian we, the human beings have landed spacecraft on Venus. One of them lasted over 2 hours. Woo! So that's good. But when it landed, its lens cap didn't come off, so we didn't get any pictures. So lame. Well, it was made by the Soviets, so what do you expect? Hey, the Cold War's been over for a long time. Everyone's like, too relevant. I don't know. Ooh. Does anybody have any questions about Venus? Is that where women come from? Because they're fiery? No, I don't think any women
Only
could
redheads.
come from Venus.
But we do name features on Venus after famous women. So there is a feature named after Sacagawea. There's features named after Aphrodite, after Sif from Norse mythology. So we tend to name features on Venus after women because of the namesake.
Sif is Thor's wife, in case you had a big question mark over your head when you heard that name. You're like, Sif? I didn't know Star Wars had anything to do with Norse mythology. Any other questions about Venus before we fly off to a new place? The gravity is pretty comparable to the Earth. So Venus is just slightly smaller than the Earth. It's made up of the same materials. So if you went to Venus, you probably wouldn't notice much of a change in terms of gravity.
It's 91% of Earth's gravity, so pretty darn close.
Pretty close. Is the temperature the reason you can't make any details out? The main reason you probably can't make details out in a telescope is because of the air, the atmosphere, right? So you're not going to see canyons, you're not going to see mountains. All you're going to see are the clouds. All you're going to see is sort of this haze of clouds, all those sulfur monoxide clouds. The clouds are like 7 miles thick.
I mean, and even to see this amount of detail, this is actually a lower layer in the cloud atmosphere. We had to use some infrared observations to be able to pull this much of detail out. But if you do have a telescope and look at Venus, fun story, you can watch it go through phases, just like our moon.
Proof that the Earth is not in the center of the universe.
Woohoo!
You need a telescope for that.
What is in the center of the universe?
There is no center of the universe because it is infinitely large. I'll give you something to chew on in your brain to think about how infinity works. If I had a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, and every single one of those rooms had somebody inside of it, and somebody showed up at my hotel and said, "Do you have any rooms?" I'd say yes. And I'd always say yes, because I have an infinite number of rooms. Oh? Yes.
Can we say that Earth is at the center of the observable universe?
Can we say that Earth is at the center of the observable universe? We can. We can put the center of the observable universe anywhere we want. It could be Earth, it could be the sun, it could be the center of the Milky Way, it could be the Andromeda Galaxy. We can put the center wherever we want. It's just going to change a lot of the math that we do.
But
For
it doesn't-
convenience purposes,
yeah.
we usually put the Earth in the middle,
And it
or at least the
does
solar system.
look like we are at the center from where we are at any given point.
Yes, if you look at some part of the universe is expanding. So if I look at a galaxy on the far edge of the universe, it looks like it's moving away from the Earth. And if I look over here, it looks like it's moving away from the Earth. But if I went to that galaxy and looked at the Earth, it would look like the Earth is moving away from that galaxy. So that's another tricky thing about space and time and stretching universes stuff. Does anybody have a place they want to see?
It can be anywhere. It can be outside of our solar system. It can be a moon, a planet.
Europa. Pluto, I heard both those. Pluto is not a planet, neither is Europa. That's the wonderful thing.
It got reinstated.
We can go wherever we want.
Pluto has not been reinstated.
Oh, dream killer Naomi.
Sorry, you know what? I'm bitter about it. Okay, I always have to do my chalk. Dr. Bob, are you here? No. Okay, great. Because my research advisor voted for this terrible definition of a planet. So should we fly to Pluto?
Yes, let's
And
fly
then
to
to
Pluto.
Europa? Yeah, so I always have to check to make sure he's not here to fight before I let my bitterness out. It's fine. So what is the definition of a planet?
Well, for a long time there wasn't a definition of a planet.
It's true.
Everybody just kind of knew what a planet was. It was either Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto.
Or sometimes Ceres.
That's true too. Or sometimes Vesta.
That's true. And then we got Eris, Haumea, Maki Maki, the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, all those fun ones out in the Kuiper Belt. I'm not kidding when I say Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. Those were the unofficial names for a while. No one thinks that's funny. I thought that was hilarious. Okay. So do you want to take the definition? You want to take...
Yeah,
Step
the
one.
definition of a planet is an object that is spherical, large enough to be a sphere.
Which is really not all that hard.
It orbits the sun,
Yep.
and it is the most gravitationally dominant thing in its orbit.
So if we nitpick that apart, as I do, so it has to orbit the sun. So those thousands of exoplanets we've discovered in the last decade, not a planet at all. They're
Because
just,
they don't orbit the sun, they orbit another
Yeah.
star.
and being around, that's probably a good thing, right? But even Texas could do that if we jettisoned it out into space.
That's right, Texas could be big enough to be round.
And I don't know if I want the Texans to know that or not. But it's...
You say it like they're a gang. You're like, I don't know if I want the Texans to know that.
I'm from Colorado. What do you expect? I'm a native. But the clearing out the orbit is what makes it really problematic because even Earth hasn't cleared out its orbit.
No, we have a big object nearby.
Well, but that is our moon.
No, right.
And that one, that's okay. The moon counts because we've gravitationally dominated it and made it a moon. I don't know. But we have a ton of near-Earth asteroids that we're constantly monitoring because they might hit Earth at any point because they cross Earth's orbit. So technically, Earth is not a planet. But they fixed it in a footnote, so it's fine,
They
right?
did. They fixed
Right?
it in the footnote.
So that's
The big controversy about Pluto is when there was a discovery made about Pluto and its largest moon, Charon, which we'll show you here in just a second. But I like, Pluto's always kind of been the underdog because before it was ever discovered, there was this guy named Percival Lowell who had an observatory in Arizona, and he was convinced there was a planet that was six times the size of Neptune, like orbiting out beyond Neptune. He called it Planet X. It showed up in Looney Tunes cartoons and all sorts of stuff. And he was kind of laughed at by the scientific community at the end of his life, but he instructed his observatory, the Lowell Observatory, to keep looking for Planet X. And there was somebody who worked there named Tom Baugh, and literally this was his job. I mean, imagine if this was your job. This is what he would do. He would take a photograph of the night sky through the telescope, and then he would look at the photograph. He'd take hundreds of photographs, and then he would compare the photographs to see if anything had moved. That's how he found Pluto. Very dedicated, I feel like. Very, very dedicated. What he couldn't see, though, was this moon right here. Pluto is way far away, really faint. These wonderful images of Pluto and Charon come from the New Horizons spacecraft, which just got there in 2015. That's the first time we ever really visited Pluto. And when the orbit of Pluto and Charon was discovered, this started to become a huge problem for astronomers because they get nitpicky about definitions, right? If we're going to call Pluto a planet, because Charon and Pluto orbit a point out in space called their barycenter.
Barycenter. You're thinking about the Barony chair. It's fine.
Very center. It's the very berry center. It's like the part in a cereal that's very berry flavored. Now, when they orbit their barycenter, they orbit a point out in space. That's the center of their shared mass. And if we're going to call Pluto a planet, then there's really no good reason we shouldn't call Charon a planet. And Charon is about the size of Texas.
It is. And Pluto's about the size of Australia.
So if Charon suddenly becomes a planet, then a bunch of asteroids, a bunch of comets, a bunch of other objects in the solar system would suddenly become planets.
Well, and Mike Brown at this time, too, was starting to discover tons and tons of objects out beyond Pluto that were about Pluto's size, that we had no idea there was anything out in the Kuiper Belt. It was theoretical until this point, and we started finding these huge, spherical, huge being relative, Australia-sized objects that
That's
were
pretty
around.
big to me. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I feel like Australia's pretty big.
It's like 1,400 miles. It's not so bad. But do we have to make all of those planets too? And so the main argument was, do we want to make the poor school children memorize hundreds and hundreds of planets?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Give them a clever rhyme. It's like Mallory, Valerie, Emily, Mickles. Just saved up 999 nasty, nebulous, like every other thing that starts with N, up to 1,000. Yeah, that'd be a tough rhyme. So a bunch of people debated for about, 15 years?
No, so I mean, they put it out to a committee a year in advance of the vote that said, okay, come up with a definition of a planet. And so they did. And they had science writers, planetary scientists, astronomers. This was a huge committee to figure out what it meant to be a planet. So they took it to this huge convention, the International Astronomical Union, which is in charge of naming everything in the universe.
No pressure.
4,000 astronomers, and they all went, yeah, no, we don't like it. And so they went through multiple iterations, but the one that passed was like this committee put together that Friday of the conference, and they finally put the vote, 4 o'clock, Friday afternoon, 400 astronomers left, and that's what passed.
And
so
then on the news 2 weeks later, everybody was like, Pluto not a planet anymore? You'll hear the full story at 10, right? And then everyone was like, no! Because back in my day, there were 9 planets.
Man, that made me really cool in high school for like a week. Everyone's like, oh, who's that nerd that knows about space? Naomi, she'll tell us why Pluto's not a planet. And I got really popular, and then they all ditched me when they didn't care about Pluto anymore. It's fine.
The status of Pluto is disputed by some people. Some people will say that Pluto is still a planet. Some people will say that it's not. Because the museum follows the guidelines set by the International Astronomical Union, because we have curators and scientists here that publish papers and things, and they're part of that union, we go with that recognized definition, so we call Pluto a dwarf planet. It may change in the future, it may not. That's one of the great things about science, right? As we learn new things, we change the way we feel and understand about things. And this isn't the first time this has happened. If you went to school in 1812, you would have learned that there were 9 planets in the solar system way before they had discovered Pluto, because they thought asteroids, which they were just starting to discover, were planets too. So it isn't the first time in history that this has happened, and it probably won't be the last time. So I don't know, that's like a thing.
But we still love it. We still love Pluto.
We do love Pluto.
And frankly, I think it is one of the most interesting objects in our solar system. It has caused scientists to reevaluate what small bodies in our solar system can be like. Because frankly, before we flew out here, we thought it would be pretty dead like our moon or Mercury. But we found a place that has water ice mountains that are 10,000 feet high and glaciers of solid nitrogen that are changing and flowing, and it's still geologically active after, well, for lack of a better term, plutologically active. I don't know, geo means Earth. But after 4.5 billion years, where it should be too small It should have frozen out. I mean, Mars is much bigger, and it has, but here is this tiny little kind of plucky item, a plucky person, planet, whatever it is in the solar system, that is still causing scientists to come up with new theories to explain it.
Large white area right here is a glacier made of nitrogen. That's most of the air in this room is made of nitrogen. So it's so cold out here, it's like negative 350 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, that the air in this room would turn solid.